The grand resonating chamber of the Cathar Confederacy hummed with a light that was not born of technology, but of thought itself. It was a vast, crystalline cavern, where the very walls were living archives, pulsing with the faint, internal luminescence of a billion years of consensus. At its heart floated the Luminary Council, their multifaceted carapaces reflecting the ambient glow, their forms like sculpted jewels suspended in a silent, sacred space. Before them, a holographic projection shimmered, a void-black dagger of a vessel, stark and lifeless against the swirling nebula of the Korovan sector. No lights adorned its hull. No energy signatures betrayed the warmth of a life support system or the thrum of an active engine core. It was a ghost, a specter of impossible geometry, and it had sat at the nexus of whispers for 3 standard cycles, utterly motionless, utterly silent. High Luminous Jathal, first voice of the Confederacy, felt the collective disquiet of his people as a low, discordant chime that resonated deep within his own crystalline structure. His internal light, usually a steady, serene sapphire, now flickered with anxious flecks of violet. The ship was an affront to every principle the Cathar held sacred. Their own vessels were things of beauty, great solar sails of woven light and living crystal, crewed by thousands of harmonious minds working in perfect concert. They were expressions of unity, of life reaching for the stars. This thing before them was an expression of nothing. It was an absence, a void given form, and its silence was louder than any battle cry. The species that had built it, these humans, were a new presence in this spiral arm of the galaxy, a disquieting enigma whose brief history was a tapestry of contradictions. Sudden, explosive expansion followed by long periods of inexplicable quiet. Acts of profound generosity juxtaposed with records of brutal internal conflict. Strategist Vrex, whose carapace was the color of hardened magma and whose internal light burned a fierce, impatient crimson, let a sharp, percussive chime cut through the chamber's low hum. "It is a weapon," he resonated, his thoughts precise and unyielding. "Its purpose is irrelevant, its state of operation is a deception. Our deep-range probes were atomized upon approach. The scout vessel that attempted a passive scan was unmade, not destroyed in any conventional sense. Its constituent matter was simply unbound. There was no energy discharge, no kinetic impact. It simply ceased to be. This is a level of passive threat neutralization that defies our understanding of physics." Vrex's projection shifted, showing the data streams, cascades of light glyphs that detailed the scout's final moments. There was no warning, no lock-on tone, no defensive posture from the human vessel. The Cathar scout, a marvel of stealth and sensory technology, had drifted within a proscribed perimeter, and then in the space between one data pulse and the next, it was gone. Only lingering quantum echoes remained, the faint, ghostly signature of matter violently returned to its base energy state. "A perimeter of perfect negation," Vrex continued, his crimson light flaring. "It does not attack, it does not defend, it simply erases that which it deems a threat. A warship without a crew is the ultimate expression of belligerence. It implies a creator so confident in their destructive art that they do not even need to oversee its function. It is the cold, calculated logic of a species that has outsourced its capacity for violence to an unthinking, unfeeling machine." From across the floating council, a soft, silver-blue light pulsed in gentle opposition. It was empath scribe Lyra, whose role was not to strategize or govern, but to understand. Her chimes were melodic, carrying undertones of sorrow and deep contemplation. "Or it implies a species that has suffered so profoundly that they have built a monument to their pain," she resonated, her thoughts weaving a complex counter-narrative. "We have observed that it has not moved, it has not expanded its perimeter, it has not broadcast any threats. It is a silent sentinel. The probes it destroyed were intrusive. The scout vessel crossed a line that, while invisible, was clearly absolute. We speak of its deadliness, yet all of its actions have been reactive. Have we considered that its silence is not a threat but a message? That its stillness is not a posture of ambush but one of vigil?" Vrex's light hardened. "A vigil for what, empath scribe? A vigil over a strategic choke point that controls access to a dozen nascent civilizations. A vigil that has, by its mere presence, halted the flow of commerce and exploration throughout an entire sector. This is not a monument. It is a blockade, it is a fortress, and the deadliest fortresses are those that do not need to be manned." The debate flowed back and forth, a tide of resonant light and conflicting philosophies. The Cathar had built their confederacy over millennia of careful, deliberate consensus. They had never encountered a puzzle like humanity. Their archives, compiled from the fragmented reports of a dozen other species who had brushed against the human sphere of influence, painted a portrait of a people who were both creators and destroyers on a scale that was difficult to comprehend. They built worlds from barren rock, and then waged wars that could crack them open like geodes. They composed symphonies that could bring a listener to a state of transcendent harmony, and then engineered plagues that could wipe out entire biospheres. They were a storm of chaotic potential, and this silent ship was the eye of that storm. Jathal let the conflicting harmonies wash over him. Vrex's logic was sound, based on the immutable calculus of survival. An unknown variable with demonstrated destructive capability located in a strategic position must be treated as a threat. Any other course was an abdication of his duty to protect the Confederacy. But Lyra's words resonated with a deeper truth, one that tickled at the edges of his own ancient consciousness. The Cathar had seen mindless drone fleets before, weapons of ancient, extinct empires. They were always active, always seeking, always consuming. They were a cancer. This was different. This was static. It was a statement of finality. "It is named," Lyra chimed softly, her light pulsing with a gentle rhythm. The few transmissions we intercepted during its arrival before it fell silent contained a designation. The other species who have seen it from a distance call it by this name. They call it the asterisk solitude asterisk. The word echoed in the chamber, a concept both familiar and deeply alien to the Cathar, a species for whom true solitude was a state of psychic torment. To be alone was to be disharmonious, to be cut off from the collective. To name a vessel of such power after a state of isolation was, to the Cathar mind, a profound psychological marker. It spoke of a culture that either did not fear isolation or, perhaps, embraced it as a source of strength. Or worse, a culture that had endured a sorrow so great that it had been given a name and etched onto the hull of a warship. "Its power source is also a mystery," Vrex interjected, dismissing the philosophical detour. "Our long-range resonance scans can find no trace of a fusion core, no singularity drive, no antimatter reactor. There is an immense gravitational distortion at its center, contained with impossible precision, but the energy readings are flat. It is as if the ship is powered by a captured piece of spacetime, a knot in the fabric of the universe that it draws upon for its existence. To weaponize such a concept, the hubris is unimaginable." Jathal focused his own senses, extending his consciousness toward the holographic representation. He tried to feel the intent behind its design, the spirit of its creators. The Cathar believed that all crafted things carried a resonance of their maker. Their own ships hummed with the collective harmony of their crews. The ships of the insectoid Gnarl crackled with frantic, chaotic energy. The vessels of the gaseous Visor drifted with a sighing, melancholic grace. But the solitude, it radiated nothing. It was a perfect void, not the absence of sound, but the sound of absence itself. It was a psychic black hole that absorbed all inquiry, all emotion, all intent. It was this perfect, profound emptiness that frightened him more than any weapon. It was the mark of a creator who had mastered the art of erasure, not just of matter, but of spirit. "We have 3 courses of action," Jathal finally resonated, his sapphire light solidifying, calming the discordant energies in the chamber. Vrex's proposal, a coordinated assault with our resonance cannons, targeting the gravitational anomaly at its core. We would muster our fleets and strike from multiple vectors simultaneously, hoping to overwhelm its defensive perimeter before it can react. The risk of failure is catastrophic, and the risk of success may be to provoke a war with a species of unknown power. He paused, letting the weight of that potential conflict settle upon the council. Lyra's proposal, continued observation and a message of peaceful inquiry, broadcast on all frequencies, aimed not at the ship but at the space around it in the hope that its masters are listening. The risk is that we appear weak, that we cede control of the Nexus, and that we waste valuable time while a potential enemy solidifies its position. The High Luminous turned his multifaceted gaze toward the void black ship in the hologram. "And my proposal, a synthesis of the two. We will prepare Vrex's fleets. They will be held in readiness, a shield against the unknown. But we will first exhaust the path of peace. We will send a single, unshielded vessel, not a warship but a diplomatic barge. It will carry no weapons. It will approach the perimeter slowly and openly, and it will transmit one simple message, a request to communicate offered in the spirit of mutual understanding. We will show that we are not a threat, but we will be prepared for the possibility that they are." A low hum of consensus filled the chamber. It was the Cathar way to hold the spear but extend the open hand. Vrex's crimson light pulsed with grudging acceptance. Lyra's silver blue glowed with renewed hope. "And who will be our envoy?" Vrex chimed, a note of challenge in his resonance. "Who will pilot this vessel into the zone of erasure?" Lyra's light flared. "I will," she resonated without hesitation. If this ship is a monument to sorrow, then it will not be moved by a show of force. It may, however, respond to an offering of empathy. Jathal considered her. She was the soul of their council, the keeper of their deepest philosophies. To risk her was to risk the heart of their culture. But she was right. If there was any hope of understanding the mind behind the solitude, it would come not from a warrior, but from a scribe. So be it, Jathal resonated, his decision echoing through the living crystal of the chamber. Prepare the barge of whispered light. Empath scribe Lyra will be our voice, and may the great harmony protect her from the silence we are about to confront. As the council members began to disperse, their lights fading back into the chamber walls, Jathal remained, his gaze fixed on the solitary ship. He felt a cold premonition, a sense that they were not simply dealing with a new species or a new technology, but with a new kind of philosophy, a new definition of power, and he feared they were utterly unprepared for what it might be. The barge of whispered light was a vessel of pure intention. Its hull was woven from solidified harmonies, a fragile-looking but resilient craft designed for ceremonies of peace and first contact. It carried no weapons, its only active system a powerful, multi-spectrum communications array. Aboard, Lyra floated in a state of deep meditative focus. Her silver-blue light filled the small, spherical chamber, her consciousness attuned to the subtle vibrations of the cosmos. Outside her crystalline viewports, the stars were a cold, indifferent tapestry. Ahead, barely visible against the inky blackness, was her destination, the Solitude Asterisk. As her barge crept forward at a pace that was deliberately non-threatening, she could feel the presence of the human ship growing. It was not a feeling that came through her sensors, which remained eerily silent, registering only the cold of empty space where a vessel of such mass should have been radiating a universe of energy. It was a feeling in her very being, a pressure on her consciousness. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff in absolute darkness, sensing the vast, terrifying emptiness just beyond your feet. Vrex had called it a zone of erasure. Lyra felt it was more a zone of profound, unyielding stillness. Her fleet escort, a silent armada of Cathar warships, held its position light years away, a promise of protection she knew would be meaningless if the human ship chose to act. She was alone, a single point of light approaching an abyss. She began to transmit her message, not in words, but in pure mathematical constants, the universal language of logic. Then she shifted to harmonic frequencies, broadcasting sequences based on the resonance of hydrogen atoms, a song of the universe itself. It was a greeting that said, "We are of this same cosmos. We are made of the same fundamental truths." There was no response. The solitude remained inert, a scar on the velvet of space. Lyra pushed her barge closer, her internal light a beacon of calm determination. She was now approaching the invisible perimeter, the line where the Cathar scout had vanished. Her vessel's automated systems began to chime a soft warning, a gentle protest against her course of action. She overrode them. Faith required risk. Understanding required a step into the void. She crossed the line. For a moment, nothing happened. The barge continued its slow, graceful drift. The silence from the human ship remained absolute. Lyra felt a surge of hope. Perhaps it was not hostile. Perhaps it only reacted to probes, to the cold, impersonal gaze of a military scout. Perhaps the presence of a living, sentient being was enough to stay its hand. Then a change, not in the space outside, but within her own mind. A voice. It was not a voice of sound or chimes, but a direct impression on her consciousness, a concept unfolding in her thoughts with perfect clarity. It was ancient, weary, and immeasurably vast. "We see you. State your purpose." The voice was not singular. It was a chorus, a multitude of perspectives harmonized into a single point of will. It was the sound of a legion thinking as one. Lyra felt a tremor of awe that bordered on fear. The ship was not empty. It was inhabited, in a way she could not comprehend. She focused her own thoughts, projecting them outward with all the clarity and sincerity she could muster. "I am empath scribe Lyra of the Cathar Confederacy. I come in peace. We wish to understand. Your vessel sits at a nexus of great importance to many worlds. Your silence has created fear. We ask for dialogue." Fear is a product of ignorance. We are not a threat to those who intend no harm. "Your vessel destroyed one of our scouts," Lyra projected, her thought form imbued with a sense of inquiry, not accusation. "It broadcast hostile intent scans. It sought to know our weaknesses. It was a weapon looking for a target. We are a shield. A shield does not discriminate when it is struck." The logic was flawless and cold. Lyra felt the immense, unbending nature of the consciousness within the ship. It was not emotional. It was a living embodiment of a principle. "And what is that principle?" she asked. "What is the purpose of this vessel, the Solitude?" There was a long pause, a silence that felt like the passing of ages. Lyra felt a sense of immense, layered grief from the ship, a sorrow so deep and so ancient it had fossilized into something else entirely, a form of resolve. This vessel is a tomb. This vessel is a promise. This vessel is a memory so that our species will never forget the cost of its own nature. Before Lyra could process the meaning of this, a new energy signature flared into existence a respectful distance away. It was a ship, but of a completely different design. It was small, sleek, and adorned with lights. It was undeniably alive and crude. It was human. It broadcast a standard, peaceful greeting on all channels, its message translated into the Cathar's resonant language by a flawless diplomatic algorithm. It was hailing her barge. Back in the grand resonating chamber, the arrival of the second human ship sent a shockwave of confusion through the council. Vrex's crimson light pulsed erratically. A deception. They sent a token vessel to distract us while their silent weapon remains in place. But Jathal saw something else. The new ship was broadcasting its specifications openly. It was a diplomatic courier. Its shields were down. Its weapon ports were sealed. It was an act of profound vulnerability, an offering of trust in a situation fraught with tension. On the main holographic display, an image resolved. It was the interior of the human ship, and standing there was a single being, a human. It was tall and slender, bipedal, with soft, pale skin and a crest of dark hair upon its head. Its face was a landscape of subtle planes and curves, and its eyes, two dark, forward-facing orbs, held an expression of calm solemnity. It wore a simple, dark blue uniform adorned with a single silver insignia. The being's posture was relaxed but dignified. It was, Jathal realized with a jolt, completely unafraid. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova of the Terran Alliance," the human said, her voice a smooth, low-timbred sound that the translators rendered into a perfect, harmonious chime. "I speak for the people of Earth. We understand your concern." The presence of the starship Solitude was not intended to be an act of aggression. "We have come to explain." The council was silent. The sheer audacity was stunning. After cycles of silence after the destruction of a scout vessel, they simply arrive and offer to talk. There was no apology, no justification, just a calm, professional statement. It was a cultural disconnect so profound that it left the Cathar momentarily speechless. Jathal was the first to recover. "Ambassador Rostova," he resonated, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. "You are addressing the Luminary Council of the Cathar Confederacy. Your silent vessel has violated our sovereign space and destroyed one of our ships. An explanation is the very least of what is required." The human, Rostova, inclined her head in a gesture the translation software labeled as a sign of respect and acknowledgement. "The vessel you refer to as the Asterisk Solitude does not belong to the Terran Alliance," she stated, her calm unwavering. "It is an autonomous memorial. It operates under a directive that predates our current government. We cannot command it. We can only ask that you respect its purpose." Vrex's crimson light flared violently. "A memorial? You build your memorials to be the deadliest warships in the galaxy. You place these tombstones in strategically vital locations belonging to other sovereign powers. This explanation is an insult to our intelligence." Ambassador Rostova's dark eyes shifted to focus on the source of the crimson light, as if she could see Vrex himself. Her expression did not change, yet the chamber seemed to grow colder. "It is not a tombstone for a single person, strategist. It is a monument to an entire generation. It is a scar we carved into the stars themselves, so that the wound would never fade from our sight." She gestured to an attendant O. Outside the view of the Cathar hologram, a new image appeared beside her, projected into the grand resonating chamber. It was archival footage, grainy and flickering with age. It showed worlds wreathed in fire, cities turned to glass, fleets of human ships tearing each other apart with energies that made the Cathar resonance cannons look like primitive firecrackers. It was a war of a ferocity and scale that the Cathar, in their billion years of peaceful consensus, could not truly comprehend. It was a species turning the full force of its genius against itself. It was a vision of hell. "We call it the Unification War," Rostova said, her voice now tinged with a deep ancestral sadness. "It was not a war against another species. It was a war against ourselves, against factions of humanity who had embraced ideologies of pure, artificial logic. We fought against brothers and sisters whose minds had been augmented, optimized, until the very concept of empathy was deemed a tactical weakness. We won, but the cost was 1 trillion souls and the near extinction of our own species." The images shifted, showing the aftermath. Ruined worlds, silent orbital habitats, the ghostly remnants of once great civilizations. The Cathar watched in stunned silence. They had seen war, but this was something else. This was self-immolation. "After the war," Rostova continued, "we swore an oath, never again. We vowed that humanity would never again allow its technology to outpace its ethics, that we would never again create a weapon so terrible that it could be used without a conscience. But we are a young species. We are fallible. We forget. So our ancestors, the survivors of that war, decided to create a permanent reminder, a lesson that could not be erased, a guardian that could not be corrupted. She turned her gaze back to the hologram of the Solitude *. Took their greatest remaining warship, a vessel designed to be the ultimate instrument of that terrible war, and they remade it. They stripped out its command centers, its crew quarters, its life support. They left only the hull, the power source, and the defensive systems. They needed to give it a conscience, a will that was absolute and incorruptible, a crew that would understand the true meaning of sacrifice. A new image appeared. It was a list of names, thousands upon thousands of them, scrolling endlessly. Beside each name was a human face, old, young, men, women, all with eyes that held a similar, solemn resolve. The greatest minds, the most decorated soldiers, the most profound artists and philosophers of the post-war generation, they volunteered, Rostova said, her voice barely a whisper. They underwent a process we no longer have the knowledge or the will to replicate. Their consciousnesses, their memories, their very identities were digitized and integrated into a unified gestalt within the ship's quantum core. They are not an artificial intelligence. They are a collective soul. They are the crew. They are the Solitude *. The revelation struck the grand resonating chamber with the force of a physical blow. The chimes of the council members went silent. Their internal lights dimmed, flickering with a mixture of horror and awe. Vrex's crimson light was extinguished, replaced by a deep, troubled violet. Lyra, still aboard her barge, felt the truth of Rostova's words resonate with the vast, sorrowful presence of the ship itself. It was not a machine. It was a legion of ghosts bound by a sacred, eternal duty. The ship is not a weapon of conquest, Rostova explained, her voice regaining its professional calm. It is a guardian. Its prime directive is twofold. First, to stand as a testament to the cost of war. Second, to prevent a conflict of that magnitude from ever beginning again. Its defensive systems are absolute because the lesson must be absolute. It does not negotiate. It does not threaten. It simply is *. It is the embodiment of a full stop, the final word in an argument that we pray never has to be spoken. But why here? Jathal finally resonated, his own sapphire light now a deep, contemplative indigo. Why at the nexus of whispers? Because the nexus is a crossroads, Rostova answered. It is a place where new species meet, where tensions can arise, where a single misunderstanding can ignite a conflict that could spread across the sector. The Solitude was not sent here by us. It came here of its own will. The collective consciousness within it determined that this location represented the highest potential for a conflict that might echo our own past. It is not here to claim the territory. It is here to protect it from the kind of fire that once consumed us. It is a shield not for humanity, but for the ideal of peace itself. The silence that followed was different. It was not the silence of fear or confusion. It was the silence of profound, paradigm-shifting understanding. The Cathar had viewed the ship through the lens of strategy, of power dynamics, of territorial disputes. They had seen a predator. They had been wrong. They had been looking at a scar, a self-inflicted wound left open for all the galaxy to see, a warning of a pain so deep that its architects had been willing to sacrifice their own souls to ensure it was never forgotten. Lyra's voice, broadcast from her barge, now joined the conference. Her silver-blue light pulsed with an empathetic glow that seemed to reach across the void. "We understand," she chimed, her thought forms resonating with newfound clarity. "We mistook a profound act of penance for an act of aggression. Your species does not build monuments of stone or light. You build them of sacrifice and sorrow. It is a concept both terrifying and beautiful." Jathal's light brightened, returning to its steady sapphire. He looked at the human ambassador, a representative of a species he had feared just moments ago, and he felt a wave of respect so powerful it left him trembling. They were young, chaotic, and self-destructive, but they were also capable of a depth of ethical introspection that was humbling. They had faced their own inner darkness and had not hidden from it, but had instead forged it into an eternal, silent guardian. "Ambassador Rostova," Jathal resonated, his voice now imbued with a new warmth. "Your explanation is accepted. The Cathar Confederacy offers its formal apology for our misunderstanding. The vessel Solitude will be respected. Its vigil will not be disturbed. We will inform our allies and neighbors of its true purpose. We thank you for your candor. You have given us much to contemplate about the nature of memory and of peace." A faint, almost imperceptible expression of relief crossed Rostova's face. "Thank you, High Luminous. We had hoped you would understand. It is our belief that true peace cannot be built on ignorance of the alternatives. As a new era of understanding seemed poised to dawn between the two species, a sudden, sharp chime cut through the chamber. It was a priority alert from the Confederacy's deep space sensory net. A technician's thought form, laced with panic, appeared before the council. "High Luminous, we are detecting a signal. It is coming from the Nexus itself. Another human ship." Vrex chimed, his light flaring with renewed suspicion. "No," the technician resonated, the thought laced with awe. "It's not human, it's not Cathar, it's not of any known origin. The signal is ancient. It was buried deep in the quantum foam, masked by background radiation. The gravitational anomaly at the core of the human ship, it seems to be acting as some kind of resonance filter. It's amplifying the signal, pulling it from the noise. We are only just now able to decipher it." On the main hologram, the image of the asterisk Solitude was replaced by a complex waveform. It was a signal of incredible complexity, patterned and clearly intelligent. But its tone was not one of greeting. It was urgent, frantic. It was a warning. Ambassador Rostova's eyes widened. Her calm, professional demeanor finally broke, replaced by a look of stark alarm. "My government is detecting it as well," she said, her voice tight. "Our long-range observatories are confirming the signal." It seems the asterisk Solitude *S presence has had an unintended consequence. The Cathar and human technicians worked in a sudden, unplanned collaboration, their minds racing to decode the ancient message. The patterns resolved into mathematical language, then into crude but understandable schematics. It was not a message of first contact. It was a final testament, a desperate cry for help from a civilization long since dead. It depicted a map of their galaxy, and then it showed a force, a shadow encroaching from the intergalactic void. It was not a fleet. It was a wave of negation. A tide of something that consumed not just matter and energy, but the laws of physics themselves. It was depicted as a slow, inexorable decay of reality, spreading from galaxy to galaxy. And the final part of the message, the part that caused a wave of cold dread to wash over both the Cathar Council and the human ambassador, was a temporal calculation. A countdown. The message had been traveling for millions of years, but its sender had accounted for that. The countdown was not for their own extinction. It was an estimate for when the shadow would arrive in this galaxy. Jathal stared at the final glyphs as they resolved, his internal light dimming to a faint, horrified flicker. The countdown was nearing its end. The arrival was not in some distant, abstract future. It was within their lifetimes. He looked from the terrifying schematic of the approaching darkness to the image of the human ambassador, whose face was now a mask of grim resolve. Then he looked at the hologram of the asterisk Solitude *, the silent, empty warship that had been the source of all their fear and confusion. The great mystery of humanity had been solved, only to be dwarfed. Cosmic horror that threatened to render all their philosophies, all their conflicts, utterly meaningless. The Solitude was not a weapon. It was a memorial to a war that had ended. But its presence at the Nexus, its unique and terrible power source, had just unveiled a war that was yet to begin. It had been built to ensure a promise from the past, but it had just become the first, silent sentinel of a future that neither human nor Cathar had ever imagined. Jathal's gaze met Rostova's across the void, a new and terrible understanding passing between them. The fear of a single, mysterious warship was a luxury they could no longer afford. The real threat was not a warship without a crew. It was a universe that was about to lose its stars. And in the face of that unimaginable darkness, the human ship, born of a species' profoundest sorrow, now seemed less like a monument and more like a prophecy. It was a promise to fight, made by ghosts, on behalf of all the living who were about to be tested. The silence from the Solitude * no longer felt empty. It felt like it was waiting.